Our moderator for this session is Tina Donnelly of Penguin Random House. She's been a big supporter of the conference, and this is not her first rodeo.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Okay, so I'll be moderating this session. This one is about ethics and peer review. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our presenters. First up, we're going to go ahead and have Maryam Sayab from the Asian Council of Science Editors. She'll go ahead and kick us off. After that, we're going to have Anna Lewis from the Society of Interventional Radiology with Julia Mullen of the American Society of Civil Engineers. And then to finish us, we're going to have Richard Easby and Eleanor Smith of the Alliance of Crop, Soil, and Environmental Science Societies. So like I said, Maryam Sayab is going to start us off.
Perfect. Then I will start straight with peer review. That's the topic that I'm touching today. The very process we are all involved in a way or other. It has been long said that it is the cornerstone of scholarly publishing, but today that very cornerstone is cracking from inside out. The retraction rates, they are being rising year by year. There are processes that remains opaque in different regions. AI, it's been flooding into the system without a break, and the reviewers, if we see, they are fatigued and undervalued as well. The question we face here is, can peer review still be trusted? And if not, what we must truly change? My name is Maryam Sayab. I'm serving as Director of Communication at Asian Council of Science Editor, as well as co-chair of Peer Review Week. Much of my work revolves around advancing conversations on research integrity, peer review, and a little bit of more ethics, not just in the global forms, but also covering the regions where these challenges are feel at most acute, like Asia, underrepresented regions, and Arab world. And today, I want to talk with all of you about something I call ethics over optics. Because while the reforms are being happening around the world, many of them look very, very impressive on the surface, but they fall apart to deal with the deeper cracks or the ethical fractures of peer review. When we look closely at the whole picture of peer review and the peer review process today, that very cracks that the trust is becoming very visible within these cracks. We see that the retractions, they're climbing every year. And we still operate with this very same opaque systems where accountability is very, very hard to trace. With artificial intelligence, it's being introduced faster than I think we all can evaluate its impact. And the part of reviewers themselves, the people that are holding that whole system or picture together, they are really overburdened, they are fatigued, and most of the time they got often unrecognized for this very effort. So each of these are not just the challenges that we have on its own, but together they create a fragile ecosystem where confidence in peer review, it's really eroding day by day. So my question at here comes that are the reforms that we all are putting forward, they're actually rebuilding trust in the process, or are they just making things look better on the surface? We all know that whenever a system, either the peer review, it comes under pressure, there are temptations to fix what people see rather than what people experience. That's what I call optics. The reforms that look good on the surface, open review badges, dashboards, AI work, workflows in a way, performative openness, and they all signal to the progress, but they rarely touch the deeper fractures of the process itself. So when it comes to ethics, on the other hand, it's about structural integrity during the process, throughout the process. It's about fairness in how reviewers are treated, the equity it goes in, and in whose voices are included into the whole process, the accountability in decision making, and the genuine recognition for the contributions to the whole process. The truth is that lasting trust in peer review, while it will never come from how the reforms looks on the surface, it will come from how ethically they are built to serve the community. And for the same area where the tension is most obvious, that it's about transferring to transparency side, because we often assume that if everything becomes visible, it must be ethical. But I say that this assumption is worth challenging. Transparency is often treated as, I would say, like gold standard of reform, any part. So the idea that if we make everything visible, trust will automatically follow. But when it comes to visibility, it's not the same as fairness. Full exposure of the picture, when it comes to like the peer review we are talking, it can discourage, it can add like candid reviewers, maybe discourage, it can even harm the authors and the reviewers. Maybe naming reviewers and adding such sort of transparency doesn't eliminate biases, it can amplify it as well. And without these ethical checks, the transparency that we see at it can risk becoming performance rather than counting it as a progress. To explain this in a simple situation, I want to share that when we go to see a doctor and we receive a diagnosis, even in a such serious case as cancer, none of us never demand to see that very tumor under our skin. We trust the doctor's training, their judgment of the disease, and the process that brought them to that very conclusion. Peer review, it must works the same way. It should give author the feeling that it's safe, it's confident that their work is being examined fairly, and they have been gone through the proper channels, and trust when amendments are requested, they are truly necessary. That kind of trust can be treated or created by transparency alone is not possible. What we need is maybe calibrated openness, sharing the strengths of fairness while filtering them the causes that harms the whole process of peer review. Now, add the same issue shows up again when we talk about artificial intelligence in the big picture of peer review. There comes another part, disclosures. I would say similarly to transparency, disclosures alone is being mistaken for ethics when it comes to peer review part. We see similar illusion when it comes to using artificial intelligence in peer review, a long debate in the publishing industry. The common wisdom right now is just disclose it. What have you done with AI? How have you done it? But just disclosing it, if you say that you used AI, the assumption is that the ethical box is just ticked. But actually, the disclosure is not the same as the ethical use is. It tells us that how AI was possibly being present in the picture, but not how it was implied. It doesn't tell us that if biases was amplified by this very disclosure, if judgment was compromised in a way or other, or who is accountable if something goes wrong. It doesn't safeguard against over reliance, and it doesn't measure that fairness as well. And what usually troubles me, part of being co-chair of peer review week and listening to a lot of conversation happening around peer review process, peer review ethics, and the use of AI, I have seen that many of senior editors, the experts who have been monitoring the peer review process for decades, they're asking the same questions about AI usage, how to use it, about the transparency that should not have been asked at that level, into my opinion. I would expect the beginners they can ask, or the persons who are new to this field, to wonder where AI fits or how much transparency is enough. But if our expert level managing editors or the editors, they're still unsettled by these questions, and I guess that we all have to stop and think ourselves that where exactly are we headed with the current reforms that we are building? And the real challenges is not the disclosure itself, the transparency itself. It's developing ethical guardrails, clear frameworks, and accountability. So AI strengthens the peer review rather than undermining the whole process. And when we have like AI has a disruptive conversation throughout the process. The deepest fractures in the whole peer review are not new. They are the inequities that we still have been with us along while dealing this peer review and peer review process throughout. Now, moving forwards to another point that peer review is not global. It's been built on sustained on a narrow base, and that imbalance shows that reviewer in North America or maybe in Europe, they carry most of the loads, while the vast regions of global south, they remains underrepresented. The early career researchers, they are eager to contribute, but at some point they don't know how to contribute, what to contribute, and they are rarely invited in as well. So when contributions are made, the recognition is automatically inconsistent at the best and goes invisible at worst. So if peer review is meant to serve all of the scenarios in an equity part, it cannot continue to silence half of the world. What we have to do, we should rebuild system or trust in a system that is like this uneven by redesigning strategies that makes participation broader, recognition a little bit more fairer, and accountability much more stronger in that part. To me, peer review is only as strong as the trust that sustains the whole process. And from where I see, the rebuilding that trust means going beyond policy statements and actually changing how we all work together. It means widening the circle, bridging the diverse and underrepresented reviewers. It means that valuing the invisible, giving the real credit to the hours of the work that reviewers put in, and it goes like simple. It means guiding the machines using AI carefully within the limits, the audits, and human oversight. And it also means that teaching and upholding, investing in reviewers, their training, and ensuring their accountability. All of these, they all look like a little bit of cosmetic fixes, but they are the practical ways to move from optics to ethics and reform to form symbolic reforms to structural changes. And this is where I would say the line between reforms and the integrity becomes most important, because integrity, it can never be an after effect. It will come thereafter. What worries me most with the conversation around the whole peer review and peer review process, the full picture, it's most about the surface level reforms, which is not just that they don't go far enough, it's what they mean for the future. From my experience at ACSC and as co-chair of Peer Review Week, I find myself asking throughout this picture that what actually are we leaving behind the next generation? Peer review, it was created as a safeguard for the science, but somewhere along the way, we have blurred the lines. We have started confusing the machines of the peer review process, the mechanism of whole peer review process with the very idea of peer review itself. Now, with so much noise around AI being used in peer review, some of it is intentional, some of it is not. So we risk letting the debate of the process distort the meaning of peer review altogether. Just like how a sentence can shift its whole meaning depending on who say it, even if the words are identical. So peer review too can be reshaped sometime unintentionally by the way we handle these debates throughout. So our responsibility here, it's very clear to hold on the true legacy of peer review once it was invented, and to protect its integrity now so that the future generation, they can inherit not the confusion that's caused by the system, by the machines, but a system that can trust and carry forward. Before I close, at this very fragile moment of science that we stand at a choice. We can keep polishing appearances, chasing the very dashboards, the badges, or maybe the labels, or we can choose to build something that lasts together. For me, the only path forward is to embed ethics at the very heart of peer review and peer review process and put a stop to the confusion, because without ethics the reforms, they are only temporary, they will not serve more than a generation. But with ethics, the peer review, it can remain the cornerstone of scholarship, not just for us but for the generation to whom we will inherit and pass it on. That's the legacy we are responsible for, and that's the legacy worth fighting for. Thank you, and let's keep working together to ensure that only ethics, not optics, shape the future of peer review.
So, good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. We're so excited to be presenting at the GW Ethics and Publishing Conference. My name is Julia Mullen. I'm the editorial books administrator at the American Society of Civil Engineers, and I'll let my partner Anna introduce herself really quick.
I'm Anna Lewis. I'm the managing editor for the Journal of Interventional Radiology at the Society of Interventional Radiology.
So today, Anna and I are discussing how and why we should root ethics in peer review amidst our transformative publishing landscape, because as we all know, new technologies and policies create a rapidly shifting publishing industry. So when we think about peer review, we often focus on logistics, timelines, reviewer selection, decision notifications. But what if we pause to ask what values are guiding these decisions? Today, we want to explore how ethics are not just a backdrop to peer review, they're embedded and should be embedded in every step. There should be a larger conversation of ethical infrastructure because ethics are deeply rooted at the core of peer review and publishing models. So to get your brain thinking about ethics and peer review, reflect on what you would do in the following situation. Imagine a researcher, author uses an AI tool to help write their abstract for a paper. It's clear, concise, better than what they could have fully written on their own, but they don't disclose how it was used, thinking it was no different than a spell check or a writing aid for their abstract that they had originally written on their own. Does it matter if the intellectual content is still theirs? Some may think that it's acceptable to use AI for writing without complete disclosure if the intellectual content is original, some may not. So before diving into how and why you should build ethical infrastructure in peer review, we'll talk about how ethics are embedded in peer review already. While we think of peer review as a technical quality control mechanism, at its core, it's an ethical practice. In fact, ethics already provide the invisible scaffolding that makes peer review possible. Look at safeguarding knowledge. As previous speakers have talked about, peer review determines what becomes part of the scholarly record. Reviewers must assess not just for technical accuracy, but whether the work contributes meaningfully, avoids harm, etc. These judgments reflect ethical reasoning, and without this, peer review loses its credibility. Or look at fairness and impartiality. Reviewers are expected to be unbiased, avoid conflicts of interest, and evaluate work solely on its merit. And these are expectations that are rooted in ethical principles of fairness and justice. With confidentiality and trust, reviewers, they're expected to protect unpublished ideas and data, and without adherence to said confidentiality, the trust underpinning the system collapses. Looking at respect and constructive critique, peer review expects feedback that balances rigor with respect. It's focused on improving ideas, not criticizing individuals. Responsibility to the broader community. Decisions from peer review affect not just researchers and authors, but future researchers, practitioners, and the public who may rely on such published findings. And look at integrity of scholarship. Reviewers and editors serve as a check on ethical breaches such as plagiarism and data fabrication. So recognizing this broader point that ethics are already in the scaffolding of peer review strengthens the case for building broader ethical infrastructure in peer review. But this is where the challenge lies. While these values may be inherent, they are not always intentionally supported. And that's why we believe that there should be a larger conversation about ethical infrastructure, because ethics shouldn't just be left to chance or individual decision. If ethics are already deeply inherent to peer review, then formalizing and enforcing them is not an added burden, but a natural extension of what the system already demands. Without infrastructure, ethical peer review is inconsistent.
And that's why ethics should never be treated in isolation. We found publishing is a living ecosystem where peer review, editorial policies, and community trust all intersect with each other. And protecting that integrity requires regular dialogue and collaboration across the whole system itself. Existing beyond a checklist, this is more so an ongoing conversation that we owe to ourselves and to our communities that we serve, so we can reflect on where we are today and how we can continue to evolve and maintain that trust as our landscape changes. When we think about ethics and peer review, it's tempting to treat it as a checklist or a one-time policy, but in reality, ethics are a dynamic part of our network. It requires constant attention and active alignment. And because ethics relies on system-wide collaboration, the logical next step is to build the structures that uphold them. So we'll walk through some practical ways to build an ethical infrastructure that's active, responsive, well-supported, and sustainable. Ethical breaches, they do happen. So making sure that we respond quickly and effectively does matter. Continuous reviewer training reinforces ethical culture, leadership. It sets the tone and models expectations for integrity. Technology can help track, guide, and safeguard peer review. And lastly, using data visualization tools like heat maps helps us track how these ethical values can align with our organizations within our scholarly publishing community. When we respond to ethical breaches, it helps to start by looking at the most common issues in peer review. Authorship issues like honorary authors or co-authors that aren't properly verified or even unclear contributions are often reported, but they can still weaken trust in the research and the people that are responsible for it. Research misconduct such as plagiarism and falsifying data remains a concern, especially in studies with significant impact to the public. And then issues can also stem from those who do evaluate manuscripts. Bias, low quality feedback, and fake reviewer identities can all undermine the reviewer process. And more so, less common, but still serious problems like pressuring authors to cite certain papers, personal attacks, deliberate delays, or breaches of confidentiality can seriously jeopardize how organizations and stakeholders view the credibility of published work. So next, we'll look at two hypothetical yet very familiar situations that can raise really important questions about ethical breaches. In the first scenario, a team notices differences between the data in the original study reports and what appears in the accepted manuscript. The dilemma becomes, are these small explainable variations, or could they change how the results are interpreted? It's the kind of situation that forces a team to pause and decide how to assess the impact, who to involve, and how to even document these next steps responsibly. In a different scenario, cultural expectations can come into play when a contributor from a different country adds an honorary author or someone who doesn't quite meet the authorship criteria to the byline. Now, it might not align with Western authorship standards, but it does raise some important questions like, how can global teams respect local customs while following the proper publication guidelines? And how can early communication prevent gray areas? These specific cases show that breaches aren't always necessarily deliberate. They can often occur in gray areas where clear guidelines are crucial, and frameworks provide this clarity. WAME offers recommendations on peer review and publication practices. COPE offers tools on addressing misconduct and ethics, and ICMJE sets reporting and contributor responsibilities. So when breaches happen, which they will, responses should be timely and fair. And those specific frameworks give structure and help us provide responses that are just that, timely and fair. Training and support for reviewers matters immensely because they can help reduce ethical breaches, which in turn improves ethical infrastructure. Proper training promotes consistent and responsible review by helping them spot conflicts of interest, potential bias, and plagiarism. And it also helps them ensure that studies are evaluated correctly, supporting their career growth overall. Thankfully, this is very accessible because most journals or societies offer structured programs, and these can include online courses, trending workshops, mentorships with other skilled editors, basic peer review certifications, or community feedback programs like PRE Review. So ensure reviewers are the gatekeepers of trustworthy research, and well-supported ones help build confidence and reduce misconduct. So next we'll look at how leading journals support reviewer development and track its impact. Journals play a key role in supporting reviewer training and development. So let me give you a quick distinction. Training often refers to formal programs for newer participants to learn the basics and the process of peer review. Development is broader and ongoing. It includes feedback, monitoring, and opportunities to refine skills over time, even for the more experienced reviewers. This growth can be fostered in a number of ways, like guidelines and checklists help reviewers assess manuscripts reliably, while recognition programs that include certificates, gifts, or public acknowledgement boost motivation. Even interactive learning like debates and role play can help guide reviewers to make thoughtful and honest decisions in all situations. This evidence shows that these approaches together mainly help them become confident and motivated. And because peer review is the backbone of research people can trust, ongoing support helps keep that system strong and reliable. Next is leadership. It's critical that any organization, and it's especially critical in peer review and publishing. Strong top-down guidance sets the tone. And so typically the structure is set up with a few key roles. First, our editor-in-chief. They provide direction and enforce editorial policies. Deputy editors, they manage conflicts and monitor the overall peer review process. And then the editorial board talks through complex cases and represent the voice of the stakeholders typically. And thinking of leadership as a part of the ethical infrastructure as a whole reminds us that this type of oversight isn't really a one-off. It's definitely ongoing, and it should be built into workflows for fairness and transparency. Now that we understand the importance of leadership and peer review, it's clear that their interventions are critical for trust and accountability. For example, if a manuscript raises plagiarism concerns, it could be investigated by the editor-in-chief and probably should be. Instances of conflicts of interest might lead to a reassignment of manuscripts or reviewers. More serious cases of misconduct can result in corrections, retractions, or notices. So to help distribute the workload and responsibility, governance models make it clear about who handles what and how the concerns should be reported. And with consistent leadership ethics training as well, that's usually offered by publishers and professional groups, and that also strengthens those structures. Together, interventions and governance models aren't just reactive, they actively reinforce ethical norms and build a culture of responsibility within publishing. For the last, or the next to last tier in the art infrastructure, technology, especially AI, is now a key part of peer review and can be highly useful, but it can also create challenges if it's not used carefully. AI tools can help not only detect plagiarism and manipulated images, but it can also match reviewers with manuscripts based on their expertise and availability. But there are risks. AI can not only introduce bias, but it can also make humans less careful and over-reliant. And it can create additional confusions when decisions are already clear. So we've seen both sides. AI has caught issues that humans have missed, but it's also flagged problems incorrectly, leaving uncertainty about who's accountable for the problem. The key point is that AI should support, not replace, human judgment. We know AI isn't going away, so it's our responsibility to really leverage those strengths and guard against those pitfalls. With those, journals can pair AI usage with clear policy, strong leadership, and confident reviewers to build a solid ethical infrastructure. Yet it's still important to make sure that we're checking on how well the system truly reflects on widely held ethical values throughout our community and seeing if it works smoothly with the peer review processes that support it.
So Anna has discussed a few of the potential branches or layers to this ethical infrastructure. Another, implementing data visualization tools, allows for consistent alignment and monitoring between our values and community needs. So as a part of our own contribution to this layer of ethical infrastructure, we've created a heat map which specifically compares peer review models across certain ethical criteria or values. So to select our ethical comparison criteria, we conducted a comprehensive review of 21 unique sources drawn from a diverse range of publishers, publishing authorities, ethics organizations, etc., for ethical keywords. And by analyzing the frequency with which specific values appeared across these sources, we were able to identify the most consistently emphasized ethical principles to use as the basis for our comparison in our heat map. So, in other words, the heat map isn't just theoretical, it's grounded in how publishing stakeholders actually talk about ethics. The bar graph seen here visually summarizes this analysis. Bias reduction and confidentiality emerged as the most frequently cited values, each appearing in 16 out of the 21 sources. Quality followed with 9 mentions, while transparency and accountability, as well as efficiency, were each cited 8 times. Community engagement and collaboration, as well as credit and recognition, were each cited 7 times. However, we did notice in our research that community engagement and collaboration are notably on the rise as kind of a hot topic, important value within scholarly publishing, within and beyond peer review. So to kind of reflect this emergence, we've included it in our heat map over credit and recognition, but it's important to recognize that credit and recognition is another value held in importance in this industry, and future comparisons or iterations of this heat map could include that ethical criteria. So this is our peer review ethics heat map. It's designed to help organizations visualize how different peer review models align with specific ethical values. As I mentioned, we built this by first identifying ethical values through qualitative and quantitative research, and then we compared common peer review models against those values. So the goal here isn't to rank models, but to reveal alignment and recognize trade-offs. For example, open peer review may emphasize transparency and community engagement, while double anonymous peer review may prioritize bias reduction. So if a community values transparency, you might lean towards open review. If reducing bias is paramount, double anonymous might be a better fit. But the key is to align your peer review model with your ethical priorities. And no model is perfect, but each reflects a different ethical lens or emphasis. So now let's consider how this tool can become even more relevant in today's landscape, notably with the emergence of AI. As AI tools become more integrated in writing, reviewing, even editorial decision-making, certain ethical values may rise in prominence. Transparency, who or what contributed to the work? Accountability, who is responsible for decisions made with AI assistance? Quality and integrity, is the intellectual contribution original and traceable? Confidentiality, can AI easily access these published or unpublished papers and manuscripts? Efficiency, how do you handle the influx of submitted papers or manuscripts? So these shifting priorities can inform which peer review model best supports your community's missions. So this heat map isn't static, but a strategic tool that can help you ask what values matter most to us right now? How do our current peer review practices support or conflict with those values? And how can we adapt as those values evolve? How can we evolve our peer review system to better reflect our values and mission? So this is why we advocate for a broader conversation of ethical infrastructure, because ethics shouldn't just be embedded in peer review, they should be actively supported and strategically aligned. So from the heat map, a few key insights stand out that can help guide how we think about peer review models and ethical infrastructure as a whole. Firstly, ethical priorities are not universal. Different organizations, even different disciplines or scholarly niches, emphasize different values. Some prioritize transparency and accountability, others community engagement. Secondly, ethical trade-offs are inevitable. No peer review model will perfectly satisfy all ethical values. But these trade-offs aren't failures, they're choices, and the key is to make them consciously and manage them well. So what this tells us, as I mentioned before, is that there's no one-size-fits-all peer review model. Instead, the model you choose or adapt should reflect the ethical values most important to your organization and communities, which leads us into our third point with strategic alignment. Strategic alignment is essential. The peer review model you should choose, as I just said, should reflect the values of your community. So if your stakeholders value openness and accountability, your model should support those values, not work against them. And this is especially relevant in a rapidly evolving publishing landscape with AI, as we talked about earlier. With the shift of AI, values like authorship integrity, accountability, transparency may rise in prominence. And this shift in values should inform not only our peer review models, but how we structure peer review. Fourth point, the heat map is a diagnostic tool. It's not just a visual, it's a way to assess how your current model aligns with your ethical priorities. It can help identify gaps, tensions, or opportunities for change. And lastly, ethics require reflective practice. Values evolve and technologies like AI shift the landscape. So that's why ethical alignment isn't a one-time decision. It's an ongoing process of reflection and adaptation. So these insights here reinforce our core belief that ethics are already embedded in peer review, but they need infrastructure, tools, conversations, strategies like this heat map to be fully realized. So to wrap things up, where do we go from here? As we've kind of established, ethics are at the heart of peer review, and maintaining them takes ongoing system-wide engagement. Our peer review model should reflect the values of our organization, and ethical infrastructure isn't just about compliance, it's a strategic advantage.
So take a minute to think about the values that matter most to your organization or society and your stakeholders, and see how they can guide your practices. When you use tools like the heat map, peer review heat map to evaluate and help approve processes, you can help design your system to serve your community ethically, not just only efficiently. When we sustain these ethics, that means regularly update policies. We should support ongoing learning and mentorship for our editors and reviewers. Also encourage open communications to identify risk early in the process. So when your peer review system aligns with your values, it can help build trust, strengthen credibility, and ensure that your publishing program can thrive in this ever-changing research landscape. Thank you everyone for listening. Julie and I really look forward to talking with you even more about this topic. So feel free to email us, reach out to us on LinkedIn, or whatever works for you.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you. And thank you, Julia. Sorry. Okay, lastly, but definitely not least, we have Richard Easby and Eleanor Smith, both from the Alliance of Crop, Soil, and Environmental Science Societies, which they're going to close us out with the challenges of peer review and ethical approach.
Hi, everyone. So, yeah, as we said, I'm Richard Easby. This is Eleanor Smith. We're both program managers at Access, which is the Alliance of Crop, Soil, and Environmental Science Societies, which is a non-profit organization providing management, administrative, and publishing services to 3 agricultural science societies: the American Society of Agronomy, the Crop Science Society of America, and the Soil Science Society of America. So on the publishing side, we publish 13 peer-reviewed scientific journals. We have 2 magazines. We have a book publishing program, which currently has 350 titles in print. We do podcasts, webinars, and informational websites. Our publishing operation is deeply dependent on a robust and ethical peer review process to keep us competitive and relevant. Our presentation is the challenge of peer review and ethical approach.
So as it says, our presentation is going to cover a broad overview of the research and submission process. Types of peer review, I'll just define those quickly for you guys. I'm going to talk about paper mills, and then Richard's actually going to talk about other key challenges to achieving ethical peer review, and then he's going to present some solutions that our association has developed to overcome these challenges. So here we have our researcher who's already designed his studies, got his theories, got his concept. So he is going to run the experiment, gather the data, and draw some conclusions. After that, he may decide that he wants to submit maybe an abstract. Hopefully he will not use AI to write his abstract, and he will submit maybe to present at a conference or a meeting. Typically, researchers will gather feedback at conferences about that abstract, and from there, perhaps develop a full-length article that they might submit to a journal. And then a journal will verify the conclusions through peer review. So I believe a presenter said earlier that a lot of times authors don't know the kind of inner workings behind the peer review process, but it it is something that sort of goes around and around through various revisions. Where the author will submit, it'll go out to 2 reviewers, the reviewers will submit the feedback to the author will revise. From there, perhaps an editor might come in and give feedback to the author. It may go through another round, and it goes around and around until everyone's happy with the final product. And if they choose to accept it, they would publish the permanent record of research as a journal article. And from there, it really becomes in part of the scientific discourse. And then the facts begin to be reused. So just briefly, I wanted to define a few of the different types of peer review. And this graphic just is supposed to show, well, I'm going to use the metaphor that the car is actually the article that's being submitted. So the first type that I'm going to cover is open peer review. You'll often find this in literary journals, which is where my background comes from. But this is when the car, the driver, the passengers are all known. So you will have a lot of times people will say, this can kind of create cronyism where, if the person is known, they know the editors, they know the reviewers, it's sort of, a given that they might get published. So that's one of the risks of open peer review, but it does create a lot of transparency. The second type I'm going to define is the single anonymous. If you are not familiar with this term, it used to be called single blind. This is now the preferred term, single anonymous. And this is when the author's names are removed. So the reviewers do not know who submitted the paper. They just may only see that it's a red Volkswagen, right? They don't know the driver's history, how many tickets they've gotten, that kind of thing. So in this type of peer review, the reviewers' names are disclosed. Second type I'm going to cover is double anonymous, and this is when the authors and the reviewers are withheld. So in this case, the editor will drive the car to the reviewers and choose experts, maybe one expert in Volkswagens and another expert in engines or engineering. So the feedback in this situation is sort of left in the back seat for the author to read. And then the final type, we've got the triple anonymous. And this often requires a traffic cop to come in. And in this situation, the editor doesn't know who submitted as well, as the authors and reviewers being withheld from each other. So in this kind of situation, you might select reviewers from a carpool commuter list, for example, and the feedback is still left in the back seat. So the cop will direct the car and the feedback to the editor, who makes the decision based solely on the Volkswagen and the feedback they've received. One problem that's really increasing rapidly in peer review is paper mills. And these are sort of the dark side of publishing, but what these do are for-profit organizations that really target authors and promise publication. They will create fabricated manuscripts with fake research and submit it often in large quantities to bunches of different journals. A lot of times they will offer services like writing reviews or rewrites of current manuscripts that are already published and submit those. Another type is called a salami submission, where they take a manuscript, break it up into different parts, and they'll submit maybe the methods to one journal and the rest to another journal. So this is, I think a previous researcher or panelist said it's also an increasing problem. I do agree with that. In 2022, Retraction Watch posted about 200, they tracked about 200 retractions that were due to paper mills across the publishing landscape. In 2024, they published about 7,200. retractions that had been retracted due to paper mills. So it's an increasing problem, definitely prominent in the landscape. So why does all this matter? Why is it important to have an ethical peer review process? Well, there are some potential consequences, of not having an ethical peer review process, and these are just a few. The first, and they all kind of like bleed into the other, but the first is just conflict of interest. As I mentioned, you could have cronyism where everybody knows everybody and, they're just publishing the same people over and over. It can create echo chambers. But it's also, the potential for the authors or editors or reviewers to even profit off the publication and the dissemination of these facts. And that can have a real effect. Especially you can see if you publish research that's, bunk or bogus, and someone tries to replicate it in the real world, there is the potential for harm. So, you can imagine a situation where, let's say there's like a weed killer on the market that has carcinogens known to cause cancer. And there's a manuscript that publishes that, and they have data that correlates to high cancer rates where this weed killer is sold, right? You could just see that, the corporation that makes that product might urge their board members or paid speakers or even their stockholders who have good standing in the scientific community to publish research using different data sets that yield contradictory results, so that those replications do have the real potential to cause harm to the public good. Other consequences simply are retractions, and these can really hurt the reputation of the journal if you have too many retractions. If you're an author who's not, researching ethically, and you have too many retractions, you might get blacklisted by editors. And the same thing with an editor. If you have too many retractions from your journal, you really are going to be moved into that predatory publishing, bucket. You could also have ethical investigations opened up by your publisher into your journal, and it's just a whole can of worms there. So now I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Richard to cover the second half of the presentation.
So one of the problems we have, well, one of the things is who are the peer reviewers? We talk about this as a process, but these are actually people out there that review, in our case, scientific papers, and we're finding new peer reviews is a persistent and perennial challenge for us. As researchers face increased work responsibilities and faculty sizes shrink, available time for peer review is becoming limited. Editors often reach out to familiar reviewers. We've discussed that already, leading to a dependency on a small group and reducing diversity in the reviewer pool. Additionally, young researchers may lack confidence when asked to review the work of a more established scientist. These factors have impacted the integrity and effectiveness of our peer review process. So what do we do about that? To help address these issues, we've introduced training opportunities specifically designed for young professionals. The goal is to equip them with the confidence, skills, and experience necessary to become effective and ethical reviewers. Sorry, I've been forgetting my slides here. So one of the things we established fairly recently is a peer review workshop. And we run these we have an annual meeting where all of our 3 societies members come and converge once a year in a selected city. It's usually 2,000 to 5,000 people. And we offer a 2-hour workshop, which teaches how to review submissions. Each workshop requires the completion of a pre-workshop exercise. So there's a lot of work for us to do before these workshops, because we have to establish who's going to attend and then being able to pair them with mentors in the workshop so that they get the training they need. So we want to learn the role and responsibilities of a peer reviewer, receive personalized instruction from a team of experienced researchers and authors. So each workshop will have 5, 6 mentors in there, usually a soil scientist, a crop scientist, that they split up within the sciences we represent, and each will have a group to introduce the peer review process. So they work with groups of individuals. So at completion, participants are often ready for our other program, our mentorship, which is the peer review mentorship program. So 3 years ago, we launched a peer review mentorship program. This initiative is open to PhD student candidates and early career professionals, and basically anybody else who wants to increase their experience in peer review. Participation in the program is free, and we try to accommodate all qualified applicants. So it's a selective 6-month training program. So we start this by the candidates apply for the program. They send in their CV, their cover. We require a cover letter. Once we receive those, I ask them what their keywords are, where their scientific interests are, and their spheres of experience and expertise. And then we pair those candidates with a mentor. And this is a virtual program, so they work virtually and at a pace that they want. So most of this program is about a 6-month program. Some take 3 months, some take 9 months. It doesn't really matter. It's supposed to be a very stressless experience. How this program works is that the mentor will assign an already published paper for the mentee to review, and then what they hand that into the reviewer, then they discuss the review. That usually happens 2 to 3 times. At the end of the program, the peer review, they peer review an unpublished paper together. And so that was the conclusion of the program. And then the mentee is ready to peer review in their own right. And they will enroll with Journal as a peer review and receive recognition. So what is our long-term goal? I mean, we want to grow and diversify the pool of reviewers. We want to provide opportunities for young professionals, provide pathways for individuals to remain involved in the scientific community and our societies, help foster valuable professional relationships between experienced professionals and early career scientists, and ensure that all peer reviewers provide expert and objective reviews of the research papers we publish. Thank you.
A general question about the peer review process. So for a peer reviewer, what's the time commitment after this training? Like how often do they get papers? How much time do they generally have to commit to do the work?
It really depends on their area of expertise and what papers we get in. So if we run a number of journals. Some people are very narrow in their field. So if you're a researcher just concentrated on sugarcane, then we probably don't publish a ton of sugarcane articles in a given period. So they won't get called on very often. If it's something else like soil health, or especially some of the topics which are a lot more, in front of people at the moment, you might get called on a lot more.
Thank you.
Is this thing working? All right, we're going to come to you in the room with the microphone so that everybody can hear the questions online. Hey, Anand, welcome back.
how large is the program and how much work is this to actually run this program?
Of the program I just described.
Yes.
We right now I run sort of 2 cohorts a year, and initially we had just six people in each cohort. We're trying to expand that more, and I have no shortage of people applying for the program. What the problem is sometimes finding a mentor. It's a bit like a dating game. I mean, I have to match, their keywords or their areas of expertise, and sometimes that's a challenge, especially if I get 6 people who are interested in genetics and plant breeding, and then I have to go and find 6 geneticists and plant breeders to match them with. So sometimes that's tough. But what basically happens if I can't match at that particular time, I ask them if they don't mind waiting, and I'll wait until the next wave comes through, and I'll just add them to the list. And that's usually been successful. I haven't actually not been able to find a mentor for a mentee.
We did have a question come in on the chat, and I see Anna typed an answer here, but Anna and Julia, if you want to expand upon this, someone asked, what are the AI tools that are used in peer review, or what have you seen used consistently in your experience?
So I can answer this briefly. My journal, we use Editorial Manager as our peer review and submission platform. Some examples are mainly Authenticate and a reference checking program where AI is primarily used to check for references and to authenticate those citations and sources.
We have a question here in the room from Jennifer.
Okay, Anna, I told you I was going to ask a question. And so in full disclosure, Anna is my mentee from the SSP fellowship program, and I'm just so eternally proud of you. You're the awesomest. And so I have a question for you and Julia, though. This was such a meaningful presentation that you gave, and I've kind of seen this presentation evolve from the poster that you gave at SSP 25. I'm curious about how you plan to evolve, continue to evolve your work in this area, and also how could those of us who are interested in sharing this research that you've done, how could we scale this to our own editorial boards and continue to build on this excellent effort?
Julie and I were actually sort of discussing this, I think yesterday, actually. So I'm happy to pass it along to her so we can hear her beautiful voice.
Yeah, excuse me, sorry. Anna and I were actually just talking about this yesterday. And I think the key thing here is some of this information that we've shared in our presentation is representative of existing processes that already, they exist, and certain organizations and publishers are already using this, but it's more of a matter of applying it in a more real world, have an actionable resource, which is what we tried to implement with our heat map. And I think creating other resources like scorecards to potentially evaluate your existing ethical system, what all your different communities and stakeholders value in terms of ethics, which values are most important. Having some sort of audit checklist to see with some of the other branches of ethical infrastructure, what you align with, what you already have, what you might be missing. Having kind of those tangible, actionable resources and tools, I think would be the next step and of most benefit for editorial boards, publishers, reviewers, even authors, and their scholarly communities themselves. Anna, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that.
No, you summed it up perfectly.
We had another question come in on the chat. Jennifer said that she had never heard of triple anonymous peer review before and wanted to ask, have any of the panelists experienced this, and do you find that it does have any ethical benefits, maybe even more than single, double, or open, like avoiding editor bias?
I guess I'll take this question. Honestly, I didn't, through this presentation, I learned about triple anonymous. So I haven't actually run a journal that's done that. But I will speak to the fact that what it does do is that, it keeps that all of the different types of peer review aim to remove bias. And when the editor is also shielded from the author's names, you really are getting them to just focus on the product. So, you know, and in that type of peer review, during publication, you would still reveal, you know, who reviewed the paper and all of that. So in post-publication, it's all revealed. So I think, you know, the heat map that the previous presenters used might be a good tool to determine if you want to use triple anonymous. You would definitely have to have a submission system, but it is just another way to reduce bias. And if you feel like shielding the editor from the author's names is a way to do that, you can. I don't know if anyone else wants to comment on that or, okay, all right.
Okay, well, thank you very much for these presentations, both our virtual and in person.